So how good are you at managing your time? Hey, my name is Trey Baker, and in this session, we're going to talk about time management. Before I jump into that, I got a little story I want to share with you. I had to do a training session recently, and before I arrived at the place, I wanted to get a workout in, so I looked online, and I found out they had a running path around the hotel. And actually, the way they described it was a run through the woods. I mean, it sounded really peaceful and majestic, like you'd see animals hopping around and all kinds of cool stuff. So I took my shoes and my stuff and I decided to go for the run. And when I got there, I got out on the path and it started off on this real nice little flat area. And then all of a sudden, it was nothing but steep declines and then big giant hills uphill, man. The entire time I was either going down or going up. And what I thought about was, man, online, it sure did fail to mention that. It made it all sound like it was going to be this nice, easy little peaceful run. And when we talk about things like we're going to talk about today, when we talk about time management, I think sometimes it can seem like I'm saying it's all going to be a run in the forest. But just know that I know that it's really tough out there. I know when at your workplace, when you're trying to do these things every day, it's a lot of downhill and uphill, and there's some struggles involved. But if we can all lean into the key principles of what I'm going to discuss today, I think it'll make us better leaders and better managers for our organization. So what is the key principle that I want to talk about? Well, the main idea is this. When it comes to time management, less is more. And I know right away that sounds a little odd, but if you'll let me unpack that for just a moment, less is more. When you do less, you accomplish more. And when you do less, you allow others around you to accomplish more. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of a sudden at the end of the day, you're going to wind up with a big bucket of extra time to go do all these other types of things. Chances are you're going to still have and still be as busy as you are right now, but you're going to spend your time on fewer things. It's going to be much more intentional if you'll lean into this principle, okay? And I have this quote from Andy Stanley, and I love this quote. I want to read it, so make sure I get it right. It says, "My fully exploited strength is of far greater value to the organization than my marginally shored up weakness." Your fully exploited strength is of much, much greater value to the organization. It has a much greater impact to the organization than your marginally shored up weakness. I love that quote, and I think it's a great jumping off point for how we start to talk about time management. What are the downsides to ignoring this principle? If you just kind of push this to the side and decide to ignore it, I do think there's some downsides. First of all, you decrease your own effectiveness, right? You are actually going to be a constraint to your own effectiveness. You also decrease the effectiveness of other people around you. And then last, if you ignore this principle, it is very difficult to attract and keep other great players on your team. And that's because you'll simply be trying to do everything instead of delegating things to those other people as well. So what are the reasons that leaders struggle from time to time when it comes to time management? Well, I've got a few, and you maybe have a few. I'm going to see if I can put them all on this list right here. First of all, there's this myth of being the well-rounded individual, right? The well-rounded leader, the well-rounded manager. If you were to think of a manager or a leader that you like right now, someone maybe that you hear present often, or you've just you read them or you check them out or whatever, chances are you think they do everything great, right? We seem to put everyone on a pedestal like that, but they're just like you and me, and they've got their strengths and they've got their weaknesses. Your goal should be to create a well-rounded team or organization that reflects your strengths and not your weaknesses. Not to be a well-rounded individual, but to create a well-rounded team or organization. The second area that I see leaders struggle is they forget to distinguish between their authority and their core competencies, right? As a leader or a manager, you're always going to have authority over areas that are not necessarily your core competency. And sometimes I think we feel like we're supposed to know and do everything. So if we're over it, then we've got to be the main person with it. But just remember, you're going to have authority over areas that it's not your core competency. And it's okay to allow other people to make decisions. As a matter of fact, one of the best phrases you could ever pick up as a leader or manager is this: "I'll let you make that decision," right? You should repeat that right now. And I'll bet maybe some of you even struggle to say that, but we need to let other people make decisions along the way. The third thing is this: some leaders cannot distinguish between their core competencies and their non-competencies. Well, what does that mean? Well, here's the deal, bottom line. You're not the smartest person in your organization, okay? When I go into organizations, I'm not the smartest person in that organization. We have to be willing to allow other people to be at the table. We've got to lean into their knowledge. It's all about getting things done through people and making sure that we don't allow that to become a blind spot for us, that our own non-competencies don't become a blind spot for us. The next thing I see that's a reason that leaders struggle with time management is this. Some leaders feel guilty about delegating their weaknesses. They simply think that if I don't want to do this, nobody wants to do this. So I don't want to hand this off to someone else. But here's the fact of that. Here's the fact when it comes to that. Your weakness is someone else's strength, and it's their opportunity to shine. So it's okay to delegate your weakness to someone else and to be effective that way. Last couple of reasons. Some folks simply can't say no, right? They say yes to everyone and they take every task on, and it simply becomes overwhelming. And the last reason is a little bit of a cliche. You've heard this before, and I've shared this so many times. People fail to plan. And when you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? We've all heard that cliche before, but the bottom line is that's absolutely true. And I think that's part of the struggle when it comes to time management. So what's the target look like? What are we shooting for? Well, the idea is to only do what only you can do. Now, once again, that's that statement where it feels like I'm saying, hey, it's a run in the forest, right? But to only do what only you can do. And even if you're not there yet, if you can begin to think that way, to make that your target, you can start to work yourself towards that as a leader and a manager. I got two great questions that can help you figure this out, okay? The first one is this: where do I add the greatest value to the organization? Where do you add in your organization, on your team, where do you add the greatest value? That's a great place to start to figure out how to only do what only you can do. And the second thing is this: how can I spend the majority of my time doing that? Now, you may already be pushing back and thinking that, oh, Trey, you just don't understand the world I'm in. I got too many tasks coming at me from too many directions and all that. All I'm simply saying is ask yourself those two questions and begin to figure out a plan to help you get there. And the outcomes of that will be this. First of all, it'll be more sustainable for you as a leader or a manager because you'll be operating in your sweet spot. So number one, it's going to be more sustainable for you. And number two, you're going to end up with an organization or a team that reflects your strengths and not your weaknesses. So that's our target. Here's the 3 P's of time and task management. Now, these are going to be broad strokes. I'm just going to give you some nuggets of information, and then you can decide which one you want to drill down on and do some more research on. But these are the 3 big pieces that I see when it comes to time management that have the greatest impact on how we go throughout our day. And they're this: planning, priorities, and people. Planning, priorities, and people. So, first of all, when it comes to planning, what will work for you to make a good plan for yourself, for your day, for your week, for your month, for your year? And I know we've all heard of this before. It's the SMART goal setting. Whenever you set a goal, it's supposed to be SMART, and that's an acrostic. Well, I want to use that same word, SMART, for planning and give you some different meanings for the different letters to think about when it comes to planning. The first letter in SMART stands for system. You have to have a system when it comes to time management. It's an absolute must. Now, here's the thing. It needs to be a system that will work for you. I know managers that carry around a yellow legal pad and write everything down on that, and they're very efficient at it, and they keep up with it. And then I know some people that keep everything in their BlackBerry or everything in their iPhone, and it's all electronic, and that works well for them. You have to have a system that will work for you. The letter M, it needs to reflect your mission. Okay, remember those 2 questions that we just asked and hopefully you began to think about and answer? How can you add the greatest value? How do you get more time in that area? Well, that's part of your mission. And so you need to make sure that whatever planning tool you're using, those types of things begin to make their way into it. The next letter, it has to be active, right? This has got to be something that's fluid, that's building, that's growing. It cannot be a passive system. Your system has got to be active. Why? Because our days change, and we're going to have to recalibrate as we go throughout the day, the week, and the month. The R stands for reminders. Now, I'm a huge proponent of reminders. So I don't know how you do that for you and what's an efficient system for you. And I've read everything that says go paperless, and I've read things that say go back to paper. But once again, it has to work for you. So if it's Post-it notes, it's Post-it notes. If it's a hit on your BlackBerry or an email from your system or whatever the case may be, set up reminders that'll help keep you on track. And the last thing is this: time. And it's the thing that you may be thinking, I don't have any of that to give away. But every single day, whether it's a morning thing, an afternoon thing, or an evening thing, we've got to give ourselves time to make sure that we're doing the planning. So that's the first P. The second P is priorities. Priorities. Now, prioritization is a huge part of you being able to capture some more time in the day. So here's just a few thoughts to think about when it comes to priorities. And one of these comes from Stephen Covey, the first one, and it's this: important should never be at the mercy of the urgent. Okay, Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People does a great job of talking about priorities in your life. And the thing that he points out is so often that what's important gets to be at the mercy of what's urgent. Now, we're always going to have urgent stuff to take care of. We've got emails, phone calls, meetings, things like that. But we also have to make sure that we're giving time to the important things and giving them priority. Next, discuss your priorities with your supervisor or your manager or your boss. You need to make sure, if you're in a workplace, right, that whatever you feel like is the priority is the workplace priority, the organizational priority. So make sure you're in alignment there and you're not wasting time pursuing things that are not a priority to your organization. Next, priority impact. When you think through those couple of questions, where can I add the greatest value? Really think about, if you were to do this, if you were to set this item as a priority, what would the impact be to your personal life or your professional life? And that's a great way to figure out what a priority is for you. And then also remember that the secret to concentration is elimination. The only way that you're going to be able to concentrate on certain things is by eliminating certain other things. So, for example, you've got to figure out what you can actually stop doing. How can you hand off some things to some other people? And then also how to say no. And that's a big struggle for a lot of managers that I know. And I'm just going to kind of give you some real quick tips on why people struggle with saying no. First of all, I think a lot of times we struggle with saying no because we want to please people, right? We just want to please people, and so I'm just going to say yes and take care of this particular thing. Next thing is we feel like people aren't going to listen, so I'm not going to say no anyway because they're not going to listen to me. Number 3, we think people won't accept or approve of me. Now, that's a whole different mindset when we think that we're doing things for people just to gain their acceptance or approval, but once again, it prevents us from saying no sometimes, and then we become overwhelmed. Number 4, I don't have the right to say no. Sometimes we think we just don't have the right to say no, so I'm not going to say no. Now, once again, I'm not telling you to go tell your boss and your manager no on everything, but you've got to use some guidance there. So how do you say no? Well, here's the bottom line. Anything except no is yes, okay? Yes equals yes, maybe equals yes, possibly equals yes, I think so equals yes. The only thing that means no is no. I was riding with my 4-year-old daughter in the car the other day, and I'd picked her up from daycare, and we were driving by a restaurant. And she said, "Daddy, I want to go there and on this weekend." And I said, "Well, I'll think about it." And all of a sudden she went, "Yay!" And I'm like, "Wait a minute. I said I'll think about it." But let me just tell you, if it's not no, it doesn't mean no. So just keep that in mind as you figure out how to gain more time in your day. The third P is people, okay? And we could do a whole session on delegation and probably will as a follow-up, but I'll just tell you one of the best books I've ever read when it comes to people is The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. Now, that's a little old school. It's by Ken Blanchard, but it's got some great tips in it, and I've got one of them I want to share with you. It's the 4 rules of delegation, and it simply goes like this. When you delegate something to another person, because people are a big part of time management, you have to describe in detail the item that you're going to delegate. So this is one of the rules of managing tasks. Describe the task in detail. Number 2, you assign it to that person. Make sure that they feel the responsibility of it and that you look at them and they know that this is their assignment. Number 3, ensure that the project's going to get done. And there's 2 great ways to do that. Recommend, then act. You tell the person you want to meet with them, make some recommendations, and then they go act on it. Or you can actually say to them, you want them to act on it and then advise you about what it is. Now, obviously, you've got to take into consideration the magnitude of the task and the person that you're giving it to, but those are 2 great methods to delegating a task to someone. And then lastly, you got to check, right? You got to inspect what you expect. You got to check to make sure that that's coming along. And if you've done the first 3 steps well, number 4 becomes very, very easy in the process. So, some application for what we've talked about today. If you're interested, we have a time mastery profile that I could get to you. Just reach out to me and contact me. We'll take care of that. That's a great individual tool for you. As a group, I think you should get with a team of people and find out what can you do for each other to help you all manage your time a little bit better. I know a group that recently got together and they set certain rules and guidelines for their group meetings. I know another group that set times where they don't go into each other's offices, so they all have planning time. What would work well for your culture? I've got a few resources listed here as well, some things that I mentioned during this particular training session that you can take advantage of. And then lastly, I'll just say to you that remember, discussion determines development. And I look forward to connecting with you again in another one of our Talks to Grow sessions.